Paulie G, welcome back to the show.
Tommy, what's happening, man?
It's been a while.
It has been a while. A bit has happened since we've spoken last. My wife has given birth, which
Yes.
is wonderful and a really, really beautiful experience.
Yeah.
She was a surrogate for her brother, and it's just been a really, really communal, beautiful time to be a part of something very special.
Right. So what's that been like for you, for being the man on the outside of that? I think I was speaking to you as she was getting to, I think she was actually quite well and truly into the third trimester. But surrogacy, there's obviously no emotional attachment, and yet she's still in the experience of being pregnant. Is that a different experience than what you used to? What was that like?
Look, I think naturally there were definitely emotional attachments there. I mean, if you're holding a child in your body for a prolonged period of time, there's going to be natural emotional experiences that you have, and then on top of that, she was doing this lifting for her brother and his wife, so. I think inadvertently there was a lot of emotion associated with it, but my wife's a very stoic uh, person, and she was able to handle it like a bloody Zen master, to be honest. And from my perspective, like just viewing and witnessing her do what she did with such grace was like just inspiring. It was really, really beautiful to see. And I just considered my role being a support for anyone that needed me if I could, and that's what I did. And after the birth, it was just about being there to care for her and to be there for the parents and the child as well. So it was really cool.
Does it make you want to give birth, Paulie?
Oh, right out the bum.
Right at the derriere. Well, I
No,
mean,
I
modern.
don't. I don't think men are built. Clearly not built physically, but I don't think we're built in other ways to be able to go through the birthing process.
Right, right. Well, we come into the world having gone through the birthing process, but experiencing the birthing process. This is a nice little game of syntax there, my friend.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think it's been too long.
It was so cool though. It was really, really special, and she's doing great. She's doing amazingly. Um, yeah, the actual birthing process, like all four of us plus my wife were in the birthing suite, which was a really unique
Wow.
experience for all of us to be there and to share in everything that was going on. And it was interesting to see how what my attention was like with our previous births to
Mhm.
this one. And whilst I was very present for the baby's birth this time, my attention immediately went to, Nat's welfare and her recovery, and just to see if there were any complications. And that wasn't at the forefront of my mind when the other births were happening. It was like there's this beautiful, baby that is a part of me, and yeah, it was just an interesting experience to see how my attention was different.
Yep, totally. That real sort of like paying attention to what's coming up for you in the moment, knowing that it's not your baby at this time, and yet Nat is still going through the entire experience that is um, so inspirational and powerful, and there's oxytocin everywhere, and it'd be quite an experience.
Yeah, and she, you still experience all the hormonal rides that go on with pregnancy and birth, and like I said, she was just an absolute champion.
Right. Well, Paulie, we said to each other that when we catch up, we would do some book summaries and book reports together because
Yes.
a lot of the listeners like that. A lot of the listeners like the book summaries, and that's good because you and I are a bunch of losers and a bunch of nerds that don't really seem to do much else other than read and talk about ideas like this. But tell us what book
Yeah.
you've been reading or getting into lately.
Pretty much. I think you summed our characters up beautifully.
A bunch of losers. The irony is that we're into the coaching and therapy space.
Yeah, well, we just coach other people to be losers.
Exactly. Yeah. For $4,000 an hour.
You too want to be a loser?
Yeah.
So I've been. I'm not a tremendous amount of the way through it, but I'm reading The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and I know I've read a whole bunch of books since we've spoken last. They're not front of mind, but that's the one that I'm currently reading. So I just thought it was worthwhile exploring and talking about. And it was a really confronting kind of exercise to go through that book. Really confronting.
He's done. So I've read The Righteous Mind, which was his book. I think it was one of his earlier ones. Brilliant book. It's not a big read.
That's next on my to-do list, I think.
Here it is. I actually went camping and I had water spill on it, so half of the pages are kind of cooked. But it's a really great book. The subtitle is Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And Haidt is a social psychologist, right? So he's looking at a lot of the ways people differ, as opposed to a sociologist, which is the ways in which groups differ. But he's looking at sort of the evolutionary causes as to why, certain individuals with different ideas might have proclivities to become more conservative or progressive or whatever it is. And then he put out The Coddling of the American Mind, right? Yeah. So the book you're reading is a lovely segue. I think you can just sort of see the natural progression of his research moving into anxiety. But is the book based specifically on children and adolescents, or is it anxiety for all of us?
I mean, the distance that I've gotten through it now, it's definitely based around he breaks it down into the upbringing of children and adolescents and understanding and he calls it the phone age, and he deciphers the difference between people like you and I growing up with television, and even our parents growing up with television being a very different experience to phones, iPads, but also the advent of the front-facing camera in phones being that next step, which was around 2010, I think, and the self-image ramifications that brings up for kids who don't have fully formed minds and don't have a fully formed or even partially formed understanding of self and who they are. And they're just learning all of these things and how unbelievably detrimental these experiences can be. And these, I suppose, this is the reality that we find ourselves with a lot of these young kids. So he does draw a delineation between the use of technology in adults and children, and he's so clear in the understanding that adults have fully formed minds to a certain degree and have mechanisms to be able to, I suppose, negotiate and navigate the external world that we live in, and young children are really, really struggling with that.
I mean, it's funny that he says that, right? Like, the brain being fully formed at 24. I'm 31. You're in your early 40s. It's there's 10 years between you and I, isn't there?
11.
11 years.
42.
42.
11. Turn it up to 11.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, very good. $4,000 of podcast marketing money for whoever can get the source of that quote. Very important quote. Very, very important quote. I'll give you a clue. Redback. That's correct, right?
I haven't got that right. Yes, I think so. Yes.
Yeah. Spider. That's a massive hint.
That's a big one. Okay.
Too big. Yeah. Give it away. Luke Skywalker is Darth Vader's son, by the way, everyone, just so you know.
Just to let you know.
Spoiler alert. So this is interesting stuff, right? Because, the main reason I would say that I deleted Instagram was because of my anxiety. I wasn't even on there that much, but it was just overwhelming, and you're constantly looking at other people's lives with the negativity bias that we have installed within this evolutionary technology, right? We're looking at, oh, I'm worse than them. I'm not doing as good as him. Oh, I'm not as good looking as him. And, constant, 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 constant. I mean, I was in my late 20s by the time I did that. So I can't imagine what it's like being 12, seeing this stuff.
And that's it. And the very fact, like, that that you have the self awareness to be able to reflect and self examine and say, this is not good for me. Kids that are pubescent or prepubescent don't have those tools to be able to do that, right? Like, so you said, this exercise that I'm going through daily is not serving me, but kids are just flung into a reality, and it's a double-edged sword. He talks additionally not just about the reality where they see themselves in the social media canon, or the reality, or this kind of world that they're in, but it's also the retraction from outdoor play and being able to associate and engage and navigate physical interaction with other children, and being able to navigate how to conduct conversations and to be able to navigate rough play with them. Because he also, I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but he talks a lot about the generation of parents that have grown up around the 90s, really started to handle their children with cotton gloves. Is that the expression? And that, in his mind, is a very, very bad thing, because it's not giving children the mechanisms to be able to sort that shit out on their own, to be able to give them the tools. So then when they enter the real world, they are just hopeless when it comes to resilience, being able to understand how to have a simple conversation with another, having a difficult conversation as well. So it goes deep, and I'm not even a fraction of the way into the book.
Yeah, I mean, so you're reading this. Every story, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, goes through that sort of trial and conflict where you start to feel like the world's about to end, especially when you read a book like this, right, before it peaks in a lovely, hopefully optimistic way. But based upon where you are in the book, Paulie, how do you feel about the world that we live in currently, especially being a dad?
Look, it's a really difficult one, because even, someone who is genuinely interested in this and is aware of all of this, because of the way I've been brought up by a very overprotective mother, anxious, I can't help but for some of that to come out and think of worst case scenarios. If I let my kids play in the street on their own, I think about the worst case scenario. So it's interesting going through that self-reflection process for me, thinking, okay, my instinct is to protect, protect, protect. And I understand also that I'm potentially, not preparing my children for the best thing. So I think it's about understanding how to do this in stages, especially where we're at. Understanding that I know that living an existence in front of an iPad or an iPhone is just not a good thing. And it's not preparing kids to be able to actually develop their minds in a serious way. Forget about, all of the, all of the things that they're associated with in social media,
Right.
Which we're all clear on is not great at all. So there's a lot going on there for me, but it's given me pause to reflect on how I've been parenting and how I would like to be parenting in the future as well.
Right.
Which is great. Yeah, it's really good.
It's funny you talk about the difference between our generation and the current generation, or the generation sort of growing up in that prepubescent moment. I really think I was on the cusp, so I was born in 1993, and my childhood memories are still in that era of, pre-technology. Obviously, television was around, and, authors like David Foster Wallace were talking about the issues with television, and he grew up in the 70s,
Yeah.
But I think with the way it is now and how convenient it is to be able to distract yourself from the present moment we didn't really have that. I can remember playing cricket in the street. You weren't really even allowed to come back inside until it was getting dark because parents need to prepare dinner and all that sort of stuff. So get the fuck out, you know. But also, like, really, I have a very visceral memory of playing with a slinky at my friend's back staircase up to his attic and loving it. And we were just playing with this slinky for like 6 hours, and it was so good.
So good. And like I see that with my daughter as well, because I'm tactfully creating separation between technology use and the ability for her to be able to be self-driven, and to be able to utilize simple tools to be able to amuse herself and entertain herself. And she loves that stuff, the simple stuff. It's like innate in humans to be able to go foraging. Like, both of my kids have just absolutely loved going foraging for sticks, stones, flowers.
Hard drugs.
Definitely.
Foraging.
It's been and they love that stuff, and it's just about keeping an eye on what is a safe amount of exposure to that kind of technology, but being able to do the simple stuff, and also the dangerous play and rough play is something that my eldest is a natural curious mind. So she's always, from 2 years old, she's been climbing up to the highest thing she could possibly climb to. And once you get over that initial fear, it's like, what's the worst that could happen? Okay, she could break a bone. Hopefully that's the worst that could happen.
Hopefully.
But it's like, what is she going to gain out of that experience?
Yeah.
Climbing up to the second level branch of a tree, and then a month later finding that she can climb to that next branch in the tree. That's opening her mind,
Exactly. Yep.
And it's kind of a metaphor, but it's also a very powerful tool for her to understand that she's capable of being able to do these things and ride the edge.
Right. So I think you're touching on something that's really interesting, and you look at what's going on with sports like jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu schools are popping up everywhere because what you've got there is rough play in a safe, contained structure.
Yeah.
And when we hear rough play, it's sort of an ambiguous, sort of broad term, right? But really what we're speaking to here, and I took this from Jonathan Haidt's work as well, is that you're actually learning about the boundaries of your own physical body. You're learning what it can and can't do. And you think about the implications of that, where when you're really angry, imagine you don't know what your body can do, right?
Absolutely.
That's dangerous versus
Absolutely.
knowing what it can do and then knowing how to therefore control emotions like anger, which we can't ever get rid of. That's ridiculous, right? So actually learning about, the obvious metaphor is just driving a car and never having learned how to drive, but just doing it. Without rough play, you're not going to get those really important lessons. And sometimes you stall a car, sometimes, whatever it is, but you have to do that. It's just funny that it's, I come across like someone who just, like this dumb, arrogant guy off in a hill who knew all this stuff to begin with. Of course I didn't. But what I love about his research and this discussion here is you learn these things, you understand these concepts, and you have this moment. Like, of course, how did I not see that?
It's the simplicity of it all, right? Like, it's unbelievable. It really is. And you look at the socialization of kids, or the lack of socialization in the real world, in this phone age that Jonathan talks about. And whilst some people can contain, social media as being social, the amount of tools that are not being utilized, that have been a part of our everyday, like our birthright to be humans, are not being utilized. Community, okay, part of a Facebook group, not community the way that we are like bred to be a part of a community. understanding body language, communicating with people, picking up a phone. Obviously, phones are not part of the human genome, but like having a conversation one on one with somebody as opposed to texting, two lettered words through abbreviations. Um, these are things that are it's just a new reality that a lot of people are unable to escape.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. It's weird, and I suppose I have sympathy and for parents and hopefully my future self as well. It's like you also can't pretend that this technology isn't pervasive or doesn't exist. It's
No,
there. So we have to
absolutely.
learn how to work with it, and I think from the last I heard of Jonathan Haidt talk about it, he's pretty big on it not being a part of a child or a teenager's life until they're sort of 16 or something like that.
Yeah, definitely not social media until then. And, it's like having the courage to be able to, go against the grain as your children grow up and your child comes to you and, Jeff and Stacy have got iPhones and I've only, I don't have anything. It's like, cool, have a Motorola flip phone
Right,
from
right. Well, Jeff and Stacey
2003.
stuck. Nah, no offense, Jeff and Stacey.
But being able to have the courage to be able to, I suppose, just slow down that process to a certain degree until they have their faculties to be able to navigate exactly what is going on with the self awareness that you've just displayed with what you've been talking about in your own experience and being able to say, whoa, I actually need to regulate myself here and my own behavior. And the way I'm going to be able to do that is get the fuck out of Dodge.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not easy because you do feel that the other side of what it means to be human, being very social and being very wanting of external validation and being sheep-like, part of a community, and to say no, I can't do with this app anymore. It's a similar experience. I've been sort of 95 days now without coffee and alcohol, and
Wow.
it's been isolating, to be honest with you. There's so many other factors when you're trying to give up, a bad habit. Not that I was particularly bad with alcohol or whatever it was. You could probably sort of, I could probably rationalize that. I was, up to getting sort of like 1 to 2 ish a day. Sometimes they're like, we got to relax here, pal. But I think what's really hard about giving up a bad habit is all the other stuff that comes with that bad habit that makes you you. The friends that you see when you catch up for a beer that then leads to five, the food that you also love to purchase when you're drinking your coffee, all these other things. And I noticed that when I gave up on Instagram as well. It's about a year and a half ago now, but there's people that I just don't connect with anymore. And maybe that's a good thing because maybe like is a friendship true if it's really just over or through an app? Maybe not. But there was definitely some grieving associated with that. Like, wow,
Absolutely.
I just feel a little bit more alone now. So it is complicated.
It's definitely complicated because they're rituals and they're rituals that served you. They had a function in your life, and these rituals have functions in my life. Like, um, uh, I'm going away with a couple of friends on the weekend, and there will be alcohol, and I'm looking forward to that component to it. But
Right.
if I was alcohol free, I could see that being like, oh, this is going to be hard. There are rewarding mechanisms associated with all of these vices. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. It's an instantaneous reward, but it's like you being able to determine as an individual, is it worth putting these to the wayside for the greater good to be able to, postpone satisfaction, um, to be able to do that. And well done, 90 days. That's pretty massive. How's it all been?
It's been fine, honestly, because we haven't. We're obviously about to move down south again, and
It's happening.
right, it is happening. Yes, it is happening. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So um, got a lot more of a social group down there versus up here with sort of one or two friends. So the social impact of not drinking hasn't been that significant. You know, Um,
Although Queenslanders love to drink.
this is true. This is true. But I haven't and I suppose just what I've been doing, like just waking up, writing, working, studying, going to bed. It because I've sort of lived like an inmate, over the past number of days. It's actually been pretty easy.
Mm.
I can't deny how it would be nice just to have a sort of nightcap watching a movie or something on a Friday night. You have that sort of thinking. But the tough one for me, because I've never been a big drinker, but the tough one for me has been the coffee, because there is nothing I like more than having that like wonderfully tempting dopaminergic caffeine pump and reading. Just getting up with the sun, reading a good book, and just getting super lost in it, having the words just sort of flood you, like a wave. It's that's been challenged. That has been a real challenge. So I've just been waking up and being like this.
It's a ritual. It's like, have you noticed that your capabilities internally have been able to kind of your dopamine receptors have been able to switch on their own after this 90-day period?
I have. That's what's been really good about it. I think I'd given up coffee for 6, maybe 8 weeks before in a previous stint, but now
Yep.
it's obviously longer than that, and I don't get the dumps in the afternoon, so to speak.
Yeah.
um, but I've been doing it with supplements, working with a naturopath. So I've actually given this a real crack, and
Right.
it's amazing, Paulie. Like I sleep for 6.5 hours a night. I feel like I've had 9. I
Wow.
dream vividly. I my circadian rhythm's really, really on point, and because I'm doing an intermittent fasting as well, sort of eating at 10, stopping eating by 6. It's it's boring, but I feel really good.
Mm.
And because it's like, just because it's boring doesn't mean it's not hard. Like, boring is hard, and it's
Boring.
so slow and perpetual. So I don't know if I could do this forever. I love the good stuff about it, but it does feel boring.
Well, like I think you hit the nail on the head. But you said it's boring. Just because it's boring doesn't mean it's hard. It's like boring in today's day and age is the hardest thing to be able to achieve. If you just cast your mind back like if you look glacially over the amount of years that modern man has existed. I mean, even let's call it 100 years ago. Think about how much more bored an average human being was back then. I'm gonna refrain from using the word bored. I'm gonna say how much less stimuli an average human was back then versus a human now. And I'd argue, I don't know because I didn't live 100 years ago, but
Well, you look pretty good for it.
thank you so much. I'd argue that they were less bored
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that.
because they were just satisfied with less.
Right, right.
And there was space to think, to occupy your mind. I just had a break with my wife um, last week, and we went away on holiday, and it was just the two of us. And you'll understand this when you have kids. 5 days, just the two of us. It felt like 3 weeks.
Yes.
I swear to God, it felt like 3 weeks. There was just this space in the day for us to be able to, and I don't need to say I miss my kids because
Sure.
obviously all of that stuff
Yeah.
happened, right? But the space that we had to be able to just be and just sink into space was a really, really strong reminder that it's possible, that it's available, and it's actually available to anyone, no matter how busy they are. You can go for a walk on a lunch break if you have an office job, and you can go without distractions. You can walk in a park and you can just be for 10 minutes. And that's a little holiday that you can take your mind on.
I know. And I think the other thing about living back then as well is that there was nothing else to do that was better. So it wasn't like, we don't want to conflate it with this idea that they were more disciplined. I think a lot of the struggles that people have in this day and age are unfairly put upon themselves. We put it on ourselves, right? And we shame ourselves for it. I mean, it's very, very hard to be disciplined in this day and age because we have everything,
And we're also comparing ourselves to everyone else.
Constantly.
Jonathan he cited an example. I forgot who it was around, but it was based around an adolescent or even a teenage girl who was asked, and this was actually common in an actual study, where these teenagers were asked, would you be okay if I removed social media? And or it was either social media or iPhone usage. And the first question that this child or this adolescent asked was, do my friends get it removed as well? And in this hypothetical situation, they did. And she's like, oh, okay, then I think that's a good thing.
Right.
But kids knowing that their peers still have access to this and they've got this FOMO, missing out on what is going on in this world, or maybe it's another angle of them comparing themselves to people that have access to this stuff. It's just a different way of thinking.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what it's like. I mean, you think about, I've never spoken to an adult that longs to become a teenager again. and if there are any teenagers listening to this, if it's a struggle, it gets better. I promise you. But being a teenager is really hard. And some of it's really fun and exciting and new, but a lot of it's shit because it's scary. You become acutely aware of where you are within your social hierarchy. Yeah. And that is a natural formation into puberty, right? We become more sexual because all that stuff's going crazy. So we become more vulnerable and insecure because all of a sudden there's all this stuff on the line that I didn't even have to think about 5, 6, 3 months ago sometimes, right? And it's the time where you're acutely aware of the group before you can then become an adult and become that lovely sort of integration between where you are in the group and where you are within your own self. That lovely sort of individuation process, which is, as you and I know, right, it's a conscious process. It actually takes work and will and ethic. I think when you're a teenager, though, you're so aware of the group and where you are and this and that. We all can think back to what it was like at school. We all knew who the cool kids were, who the not so cool kids were, and we can laugh about it now, but when you're there, it's very, very significant and it makes sense. Just a quick segue on that, Paulie. I think wasn't his research, Jonathan's research, saying that girls aged 14 to 16 is something like 400% more likely to be into self-harm? Or have I got that right? We need a fact check.
I'll have to fact check as well, but the statistics that come to mind for me were from 1980s, 90s to 2000, there was something like 5% incident of depression amongst females,
Mm-hmm.
I think, and then from 2000 and then it boosted up to in 2010, I think it boosted up to 20% incident of depression. Once again, please fact check. And then COVID just skyrocketed to like 30%.
I see. It's
and
not likely. It's not a probabilistic thing. It's an increase.
Yeah, it's like a significant increase. And his theory is I don't know if it's correlation or causation, but there's definitely a significant play with social media and the advent, like the inability for young people to be able to communicate with one another and to be able to socialize, like they and also their inability to be able to focus.
Mm-hmm.
Their unfocused reality. It's like this instantaneous scrolling. It's like, how are you meant to be able to focus on one thing and then have a stable mind?
Right. This is what's really interesting, I think, about ADHD, ADD, all that sort of stuff. we have to obviously recognize that it is a genuine mental health disorder,
Absolutely.
and there are biological proclivities for it, because I think it's been around for a long time, people who can't focus. But that actually makes me feel more sympathetic for people who do struggle with ADD and ADHD, because of how social media and the modern world and technology exacerbates a condition that was probably biological there to begin with, right? We have the biopsychosocial model of mental health disorders. There are three really big areas that influence someone's mental health. And the social model now has just punched all that up to a new height. And to your point, again, a lot of what we've been speaking about today, Paulie, is just when you think about all this stuff and you learn about these frameworks, but you just think about it from a simple, like with simplicity, right? It makes sense. If you're on TikTok for 4 hours and your context change, new person doing this thing, the brain loves that stuff, right? Dopamine, 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 dopamine. And then or an hour, right? Let's make this really specific to what it would be like for a high schooler. You're sitting on TikTok for 50 minutes, context change, dopamine, laughing, oh my God, what the hell just happened? Voyeuristic excitement, all that sort of stuff. And then you have to sit in an English class for 90 minutes and learn about Tolstoy. You're not going to concentrate.
Forget about it. Yep. Absolutely.
It's scary. It's scary, man. But do we inject listeners with some optimism to bring out the narrative arc here?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Before we allow the sun to shine, I was just reading up on Ed Sheeran actually, and he went into a massive bout of depression earlier on in his career, and social media. He attributes a lot of that to social media as well. Obviously comparing himself to other people in Hollywood and Los Angeles and that world, but he was scrolling for 19 hours a day.
Wow. Wow.
And
good thumbs. Good for guitar.
Yeah, exactly.
He has really good thumbs, though.
Great thumbs. He should be a slap bass player. But he was scrolling, drinking excessively, dopamine hit. Initial dopamine hit from alcohol, and then a depletion, and he was playing gigs, and he was barely sleeping, and he had to have a obvious very big shift in lifestyle.
Right.
So it doesn't just happen. Obviously, it doesn't just happen to the younger generation, but I feel like it does happen, and it happens to adults as much as kids. But kids they just don't have the chemical makeup to be able to navigate it when they're as young as they are.
Right. They're just not protected neurochemically, essentially. You can go into battle without a shield, and you might do all right, but odds are against you.
Not looking good.
Not looking good.
So let's look at the bright side, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're all going to die. We're on the precipice of an existential crisis and geopolitical politics. So
the end.
See you next week. No, we can't finish it there, surely. Well, what's some good things happening for you at the moment, Paulie?
Well, speaking of music, I've my band's actually playing a reunion show, and we're doing that in September. And I have just had the most incredible time picking up my bass again, playing music regularly. I had my first jam with the rhythm section of the band last week, and there was, it's one thing to pick up your bass or your instrument and play to a background record, but to be able to have that, and this is a perfect analogy of what we were talking about from social media to like interrelating with people.
Right.
Like, picking up my instrument and playing to a record versus playing with humans, interacting, having musical sex with people on an absolutely tactile level. It was just it was days and nights apart, It was just realities apart. That physical interaction, that primal interaction, being able to communicate with one another on a musical level, I missed it so much. There was like something in my heart and soul that just became alive again.
Right. When was the last time you played in a band?
The last time this band played a gig was 15 years ago. We're
Oh,
having
yeah.
a 15-year reunion. I mean, I've played gigs. I've played gigs since then, like just like gigs for friends, weddings and things like that, but not in a context that is as special as this, and it has so much history as well. Like we just all got into the room together. It was only four of us. We're a pretty big band in terms of like amount of people, but we just had the core rhythm section, and we just sat there looking at each other and just smiling.
There
Yeah.
was the faint removal of pantaloon, and then someone sort of said, "Hang on a second, this is a band rehearsal."
I don't think it would have been discouraged. I'll tell you right now.
It would have been thought provoking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, Paulie. Well, mate,
What about you, mate? What about you?
what's been up? What's been happening? So I finished my fourth book, which is really exciting.
Wow, man. How exciting.
Yeah, so it's just the process that I normally work through when it comes to my writing is I'll get the first draft done, chuck it away for 6 weeks, because if you're too in it, sometimes you can't see the forest from the trees, as cliche as it is. But really, what that means from a writing sense is you can't see the natural structure and flow that's really important in any book, irrespective as to whether it's a fiction or a non-fiction. And I've certainly released books. In fact, my first ever book, Yes, I'm Fine, was just sort of punched out without that necessary incubation period. And I've now just finished the third edit of that book, because that's how important this sort of stuff is.
That's amazing.
So that's got that done. Now I'm about 40,000 words into my first ever fiction novel, which is really,
Wow.
yeah.
You're really giving it a nudge, mate. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I'm waking up every morning and just writing for 2.5 hours. I said to myself about 6 months ago, I love uni at the moment. I'm enjoying masters, but I really love just losing the day to writing. And I was starting to lose sight of it. Like my mental health was not ridiculously, but I was starting to feel just a bit flat. And spoke to a therapist up here, and we sort of figured it all out together. We brainstormed, and I realized that it was just because I didn't have, a frequent writing routine. So this is why I got into the supplements and the healthy eating and all that sort of stuff, because it's all centered around the purpose of writing. That's why I'm so big on purpose and meaning from an existential perspective, because I wouldn't be giving two shits about my health really, to this level, without a reason to. Now, sometimes that reason is loved ones, right? Staying healthy as you get older, or sport, or religion, or whatever it is. But for me, it's the craft. And if I can get up at 5, so I'm writing from 5:30 till 8. What are the mechanisms, and this is just me sort of thinking out loud, what are the mechanisms that have to be in place for me to be able to do that and have an effective writing session? Well, I can't eat later than 6 p.m. because then I get a shit night's sleep and then I don't feel good at 5, right? All of these factors I've just been playing with now led to this outcome of me being halfway through my 5th book, which is really, really fun. So I'm playing with that. The ideas in the novel, ideas that I was playing around with when I was 10, when I wrote my first ever a crack at a book, which is like 10,000 words. I've still got it. It's kind of pooey, but I was 10.
I love that.
Yeah, but I've always been interested in grief and suffering and not understanding the meaning of the world and dying and what that means to you. And now I feel that I have enough information and lived experience to really give this a go in this book. So I'm really excited about it. I don't know where it's going to end up, but it's been fun so far.
That's unbelievable. And I'm sure that I love nonfiction, but I love immersing myself in a fiction book that has deep learnings behind it. Not like just a schmaltzy fiction book.
Spot's Magical Christmas.
Sorry?
Spot's Magical Christmas.
Yeah. But something that's got deep philosophical learnings behind it, where you can actually reflect and using a different vehicle. So there's the vehicle of nonfiction, like saying this is the theory, but being able to use characters to be able to be the vehicles behind that, and then sitting back and going, okay, this was actually a philosophical book masked as a fiction book.
Yeah.
That gives me great joy.
Well, that's the thing, man. Like I've done a lot of nonfiction reading and a lot of nonfiction writing, and the thing that actually ticked me over into wanting to move into the fiction world was I'd finished reading a book on grief. I think it was. I can't remember exactly what it was on, but I remember loving it, but it also being too conceptual. And we need that in life. We need to understand big things like grief from the conceptual or theoretical frameworks. That's really important. But there's so much beauty. I suppose what I'm speaking to is the aesthetics of big stuff. And I think that's better portrayed in fiction because you get to come along with these characters and their sacred flaws, and you get to feel into the experience of what it would like to be there when this person has just done this, or when you're navigating a tough time in your relationship, and be in that moment with them. I feel, and maybe I'm a bit biased here, working in therapy and coaching and so on, but I've learned more from feeling into an experience than learning about an experience from an observational perspective. So,
yeah, it makes sense. And it's innate in our human code to be able to engage more in story.
Right.
That stories have been told in tribes for forever. And that's how, like you said, the emotion, to be able to get people to buy in to a story through emotion, the lessons learned through that are going to be far more resonant, I think.
Right. Well, we'll see how it goes anyway.
Pumped to have a little read whenever you're open to letting me.
I'd love, absolutely. Yeah. No, I'd love to get the first draft done within the next sort of 6 months, put it on ice for a bit, come back at it. So hopefully sort of by next year, I can flick you the first manuscript.
Sick, man. Tommy, always a pleasure, my friend.
Me too. And who knows what the next book report will be?
Yeah, we didn't even cross-reference. You were just like, "What are you reading right now?" This. Okay, let's talk about that. Maybe we'll have a little bit more forethought for the next one, and we'll see if we can both read the same book. Eh?
Oh, that'd be Harry McClary, done.
Oh, okay. I was thinking Winnie the Pooh.
We could do Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, we could do Winnie the Pooh, but
let's see.
More depth.
I'm halfway through Winnie the Pooh. That's why.
You're halfway through Winnie the Poohing?
Yeah. Speaking of which,
I'll leave you to it then, mate.
Good on you, buddy.
All right, mate.
We'll speak soon.
Beautiful.